Professor Gerritson's wonderful talk, and I'm so happy to be jumping into our second round of student presentations. This is Student STEM Talks group number 10, and I see that many of our students have already posted and asked to present, so I think we are ready to go. I want to welcome everyone to this talk at the 5th Polygence Symposium of Rising Scholars. As you may have heard in the first sessions, the goal of the symposium is to celebrate and publicize the hard work of all of our Polygence scholars. They've been working tirelessly on their projects over the past couple months, and we are so excited to share them with you. I also want to mention that in the room today, we have one of our mentors as our wonderful panel judge, Alex Winnett, who'll be scoring each student's presentation along with myself. Alex is an MD PhD candidate in the UCLA Caltech Medical Sciences program with a focus on microbiology, infectious disease, and public health. And for my part, I'm trained as an art historian and curator, having earned my PhD in the history of art and architecture from Stanford, but with a focus on the digital humanities, which is to say computational approaches to art and culture. So really, this is not my home turf, so to speak, being in student STEM talks, but I did work with many students on data science style projects. And I'm just so excited for our presenters today. They are Vivek Inumella from B. Reed Henderson High School, Christopher Tomeo from Regis High School of New York, Arushi Sharma from Queen Elizabeth High School, and Nandhika Kurakula from Fairview High School. Whenever you have questions, please type them into the chat or into the Q&A, and we'll get to them after the student presentations. I'll hop back in with about 2 minutes left of each student presentation so that they can know that I'm coming back, and then we'll be able to field some questions. The first student I'd love to invite to present is Vivek, so I'm going to share your screen now. Vivek, how are you? You're still muted right now. This is great. I can see your presentation, but your mic is still on mute. We still can't hear you yet. Vivek, why don't we shall we invite Christopher to present now, and then we can troubleshoot with your audio? Christopher, does this sound okay to you? Let me just try right here.
Oh, this sounds good to me. Sorry, just a little.
Great.
Okay, wonderful.
Good to see you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be able to present what I have to everyone here.
We're just delighted you're going to. I'm going to, please feel free to go ahead and share your screen.
Okay.
And I'll let you take it away.
All righty. Sorry, I can't seem to find the share button. Is it? Oh, never mind.
It should be upper right-hand corner, and then down at the bottom, you can select share screen. So that'll look sort of like the computer screen icon down sort of at the bottom.
Oh, okay. I think I see it. So this here then.
Exactly.
There we go. And if I go to present, it should go. Do you see only the presentation now?
And we see you too. We
there
can, great.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just as a heads up, I can't see your face right now because my screen is only the presentation. So
perfect.
Is that okay with everyone?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation today about lithium as a clozapine add-on. So just before we get into the science of it, just a little about me slide. So I'm Christopher Tomeo. I live in Fort Lee, New Jersey. I attend Regis High School in New York City, New York, and I'm currently a senior. And just an interesting fun fact about me is that I like to cook a lot. So a side is one of my favorite things to make. It's a fried pork cutlet with some onions, some egg, and some rice. But getting into the science of today's presentation is schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is a mental illness that currently affects 1% of the world's population. But 20 to 30% of the cases of schizophrenia are treatment-resistant schizophrenia. And what treatment-resistant schizophrenia is when you are treated for schizophrenia, but the treatment doesn't work on 1 or 2 antipsychotic drugs. I've seen both standards used in research before. And we call these treatment-resistant schizophrenia cases TRS for short, to show that you have failed on typical antipsychotic medicines that are regularly used for schizophrenia. But the drug we're going to talk about today is Clozapine. Currently, Clozapine is the only FDA-approved drug for treatment-resistant schizophrenia, and it's the drug that's shown the most efficacy in treating this disease. So Clozapine works very well, and it's the best second generation, otherwise known as atypical antipsychotics of the antipsychotics to treat TRS and to heal symptoms such as suicidal thoughts in other patients. But unfortunately for many, Clozapine isn't an option because it has extremely debilitating side effects ranging from neutropenia to granulocytosis, even to weight gain. Just for context, neutropenia is when you have a deficiency in white blood cells, specifically neutrophils. And granulocytosis is when you have a fatally low level of white blood cells, causing immunosuppression and reducing your body's ability to fight off infection. Clozapine also has the risk of inducing renal damage as well, or kidney damage. So Clozapine can be a very debilitating drug. But how does Clozapine actually work in the body that makes it so effective? So Clozapine works by suppressing dopamine receptors and 5-HT2A and 5-HT2C serotonin receptors. By suppressing receptors that interact with excitatory neurotransmitters, the drug increases inhibition in the brain, ameliorating the symptoms of TRS such as hallucinations that may be caused by excess dopamine in the brain. But what differentiates Clozapine from most other medications is its ability to disrupt bonding in the D4 rather than the D2 dopamine receptors. This enables Clozapine to have the same effects as other antipsychotic medications without a lot of side effects, such as motor side effects and catalepsy that are caused by other antipsychotics. And Clozapine has been consistently shown to be better than other antipsychotics. But this is where lithium comes in. Lithium has been used as an add-on for Clozapine in order to treat side effects such as granulocytosis, neutropenia, and other side effects that may come up. Lithium has been used as a mental health drug for many years, and researchers are investigating whether or not lithium can heal Clozapine-induced side effects. Just to give a little context for the graph on the side here. We see that the ANC, or the absolute neutrophil count, and the time after the initiation of initiation of lithium. The dotted line is the cutoff for neutropenia, or that's the level where the government and health professionals say that you have neutropenia, is at that neutrophil count. We see that some of the subjects have neutropenia after the initiation of lithium, but the neutropenia alleviates over time after the initiation of lithium. If you see the vertical dotted lines, that's when Clozapine is initiated. Notice how after Clozapine is initiated, most patients consistently rank above the neutropenia line, showing that lithium actually makes better Clozapine-induced neutropenia and heals it. So there's some pros and cons to using lithium as an add-on. So the first positive is that lithium has shown to heal neutropenia and granulocytosis. In the majority of cases for neutropenia, lithium has been seen to have a lot of success in case studies. But there's a lot more limited success for granulocytosis. There have been some reports showing that lithium does indeed work against the granulocytosis, but there are other reports showing that lithium has failed. So that's going to be more of a case-by-case basis. You may ask the question, how does lithium ameliorate neutropenia? And what lithium does is it enhances the body's ability to produce granulocyte colony stimulating factor, or GCSF. And that's a protein that encourages the production of granulocytes, another type of white blood cell. So basically what lithium does, it induces the body's production of these white blood cells to help make up for the white blood cells killed off by Clozapine. But something else that lithium has been noted to do is it's been noted to improve neutrophil protection. And neutrophils are a certain type of white blood cell that I mentioned earlier, and lithium protects them from the effects of certain drugs. But there are cons to lithium as well. In fact, lithium has been seen to work too well in some patients, which has caused neutrophilia in even one. So what we see is that lithium has caused an excess of white blood cells, which is truly remarkable for a drug which is truly remarkable for clozapine, which is thought to cause neutropenia, to actually lithium causing a surplus and working too well. But what can perhaps be even more damaging is that lithium can worsen weight gain and renal damage in patients taking clozapine. Although these side effects, especially renal damage, are more rare, weight gain being more common and renal damage being rare, they're still a big threat, because recent studies have shown that there's been an increase in case reports of renal damage induced from lithium and clozapine. So what's the takeaway from this? There's definitely evidence that lithium can help treat clozapine-induced neutropenia. So patients who stop clozapine because of neutropenia can restart clozapine with lithium. But if you have pre-existing renal damage or kidney damage, patients shouldn't take clozapine or lithium, either separately or together. Renal damage might be rare, but it's not something that you want to risk taking clozapine and lithium, although clozapine works very well, and it looks like clozapine and lithium together have a lot of promise. Ultimately, though, what needs to be done are more studies that are more widely expansive, because most of the evidence that I've gathered here to support my claims are case studies and meta-analyses of many, many case studies. I've only seen one or two large lithium and clozapine together trials. It's mostly just case studies of individual doctors and teams of doctors testing patients using clozapine and lithium. So what would really be best to confirm these preliminary results are more and wider test studies with larger sample sizes. But I think that there's a lot of preliminary evidence here to show that lithium and clozapine together have a real promise, and we can help people suffering from treatment-resistant schizophrenia. And lastly, I'd like to thank my mentor, Tyler Tuek, for his steadfast guidance throughout the Polygence project process. He's been such a great help in publishing and providing a lot of guidance for me throughout my writing and research process, and I'd really like to thank him for all the effort that he put in. This is my bibliography of the papers that I used for this presentation, and that's my presentation.
Christopher, thanks so much for this. It is totally fascinating. And I certainly appreciate that it, in addition to having these very specific sort of physiological operations that you described very clearly, that it also is looking towards improving outcomes for real people who are suffering from certain kinds of mental illness. Can you tell us about how this work sort of connects to your broader interests? And is this sort of an area that you're interested in pursuing more, whether in high school or in college?
I'm definitely interested in pursuing neuroscience and psychology in college. And this really ties into what I really like to do, because it shows actual medicines that once were thought to be dangerous. In fact, clozapine was discontinued in Finland because it killed people with granulocytosis. And it shows researchers working in fields that they truly had passions for, doing something that they really liked. And I want to follow in their footsteps because I'm really interested in neuroscience and psychology, and I want to use my talents to help others who are suffering from TRS.
Excellent, thank you. Well, if there are other questions, I would encourage people to just type them in the chat or in the Q&A of our session section on your right. And I would certainly invite Christopher now too, because I know we have a bit more time. If there are other things that you want to share about the presentation, very often the hardest part of these presentations is what has to be left on the cutting room floor. So were there parts of the research process that were really interesting that maybe weren't visible in your presentation, or discoveries or challenges that you made en route?
Some of the challenges were really finding the case studies that showed the side effects clearly of lithium and clozapine, because when we see a lot of people taking these medications, they're often taking a lot of other medications as well. One medication that I saw was especially taken in some case studies was sodium valproate, which is thought to have kidney-related side effects. So it kind of blurred the line between lithium and inducing the kidney damage, or sodium valproate being the main cause of the kidney damage. And then also there's limited access to lots of larger case studies, because clozapine is a very restricted drug in the sense that you have to go on regular blood monitoring, and you have to, and there's a lot of administration problems with clozapine. So it's a really hard drug to use and prescribe, even though it works really well.
That is totally fascinating. And I think that really resonates with what Professor Gerritsen said in the keynote address, is that very often you have a precise research question for which you want to apply a certain data set. And very often that data set doesn't exist, or it's not clean in the way that you wish it would be in order to come up with confident solutions or conclusions. So I really appreciate you sharing that sort of challenge that's part of your methodology. Let's give Christopher a round of applause for a totally fascinating kickoff to our session. Thank you. And I hope that we can have some questions for you at the end if there's time as well.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to present.
Absolutely. Okay, up next, I would love to invite, let's see if Vivek is ready. I don't see him in the queue. So I'm wondering, can I invite Nandhika up to make her presentation? Or there's Vivek again. Let's try with Vivek and see if his audio is working.
Hi there. Is it working this time?
Hear you loud and clear. It's great.
Yeah, I switched laptops. I think something was wrong with that one. So.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad you found the solution. Thanks so much for presenting today. Would you like to share your screen and take it away?
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, so do you know where the button for that one is for sharing the screen?
Yes. So down at the bottom, you'll see there's the camera, the microphone, the YouTube button, and then there's the screen. If you press that, you'll be able to share.
Yep. Okay.
Great. Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Vivek Inumella. I'm a senior at B. Reed Henderson High School in Winchester, Pennsylvania. And my project focused on analyzing the factors that related to COVID-19 prevalence in my home state. Can you guys still see this when I switch the slide? Okay. Well, I think I wanted to provide a layout of my project so far, which is in the form of like a research paper. I want to first talk about why I chose to investigate this. And I want to follow that by looking at the differences in COVID-19 cases in urban and rural counties. And I want to also talk about legislation and a timeline of governmental actions and their effects in Pennsylvania, because I feel like that is something that people have been fighting for a lot. And I think it's important to, I guess, accurately measure what the pre-existing and current laws have done to help stop the spread of COVID. Finally, I want to talk about a discussion of these findings. Here's a little bit of background. I think we all know scientists announced the first case of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, which causes COVID-19 in humans. The World Health Organization has declared COVID-19 a pandemic, and currently now in 2021, 3.55 million deaths and 171 million cases have occurred. So talking about why I wanted to investigate this, it's important to look at different factors that contribute to COVID-19 prevalence and disease prognosis. Getting a better understanding of what exactly caused the virus to spread and develop into a pandemic is important in order to prevent other viruses from doing the same. Why Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania, the fifth most populous state in the United States, comprises of a thorough mix of urban and rural counties. From the central farmlands to the metropolises of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is a great model to study the effects of urban versus rural areas on COVID-19 outcome and prevalence. It consists of 67 counties of various sizes and populations. So here are some methods that I used to actually make the urban versus rural county comparison. First, I used the Open Data website called Open Data PA. It's a website made public by the government, and it is used to find and compare case and death rates. I also used the USDA's rural-urban continuum codes, which served as a key indicator for me to classify whether areas were urban or not. And I also wanted to talk about the existing resource gap that occurred before the pandemic between rural and urban areas. So here are some plots that I generated using R programming code software. And I I basically plotted the case and death rates of every rural and urban county. I also made some tables here that shows the counties with the highest case rates and death rates, as well as providing whether they were urban or rural counties. And then I also wanted to talk about the rural versus urban disparity. In the United States, the residents of rural areas have much less access to health services. This disparity can be seen in many different metrics. More than 125 rural hospitals have closed in the past decade, and nearly half of those that remain operate in the red. In these rural areas of the United States, not only are there less healthcare providers, but people have to travel even farther to access care. Previous research which looked at urban and rural counties in the United States found that rural areas have a disproportionately small percentage of ICU beds, ventilators, and respiratory treatment. Many rural residents also live farther from an emergency room, making care difficult to access should they have an onset of severe symptoms. Here are some of the findings that I made. Number 1, the rural mortality. When looking at the counties with the 10 highest death rates, rural counties had a large majority, and I concluded this to be a result of the previously mentioned healthcare disparity. Secondly, the urban incidence. Looking at the counties with the 10 highest case rates, the urban counties had a slighter majority, and I attributed this to the higher population density, leading to increased disease transmission. Number 3, rural variation. The generated box plots for case rates show that while there are more urban counties, the rural counties that were present had much more variation among themselves. And I wanted to move on to the legislation timeline. 2 methods that I used here were, once again, the Open Data website made public by the PA government. And I also used Governor Tom Wolf's newsroom, posted information about every single law that was passed during the pandemic. Here is the PA Pennsylvania daily new cases graph, which took the number of new cases each day, starting March 8th and ending on July 8th. It's important to look at the spikes and the dips in this graph, which I'll discuss earlier. I actually used this graph to cross-reference it with a timeline of important legislation that Tom Wolf passed. With the 3 arrows here, these are what I found to be the most impactful legislation, both contributing to spikes and dips. They had the greatest effect on daily new cases in Pennsylvania. In the graph, in the timeline here, they mention a lot about yellow, green, and red phases. And these phases were all a part of Pennsylvania's COVID-19 reopening plan. The different phases contribute to the different levels of restrictions. For example, in the red phase, there are much more restrictions on what people can do, whereas in the green phase, there's a lot more freedom. As you can see throughout, as time passed, all counties eventually moved from red to yellow and to green. And here are some findings. The first finding I made from this section was that the expanded mask requirements that were issued on November 18th, 2020 seemed to have a large effect on new daily cases. We can see a big drop in new daily cases roughly 14 days after November 18th. It's important to look at it's important to look at the effects on daily new case graphs 14 days after important laws, mainly because of the incubation period of COVID-19, as well as giving some time for these laws to actually have an effect. Secondly, travel restrictions. The lifting of out-of-state travel restrictions in March 15, 2021 corresponded to an increase in daily new cases roughly 14 days later. Third, the most significant spike in new cases occurred around the 2020 holiday season, from mid-November 2020 to early January 2021. As people came together for the holidays, they contributed to COVID-19 spreading. Finally, increasing restaurant capacity. Roughly 14 days after restaurants moved back to 50% capacity, September 21st, 2020, there was an increase in daily new cases as well. The bottom line, healthcare resources in rural areas need to be improved in order to minimize the impact of harmful diseases on the country as a whole. Our response to harmful pandemics like the one we have experienced will continue to get more and more effective through better healthcare for all. Thank you.
Vivek, thank you so much for this presentation. There is such an enormous amount of data that we are generating around this pandemic, and I think it's a really inspiring thing to see so many young people take on these data in ways that lay bare the realities of the situation, and that can also sort of plot a good path forward for us. I know that just here in California, the CDC has removed us from the highest stage of transmission. And we're one of only 3 states, along with, I think, Delaware and Vermont, that have reached those lower thresholds. So it's really a testament to the masking, I think, that has been reimposed in interior spaces. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your process, because you've been working with this data and sort of drawing conclusions and connecting them to policies. I think that's a really powerful way of showing the way that policy can affect public health in meaningful ways. Could you tell us a little bit about the way that you chose to analyze and express the data itself? I saw, I think, a box and whiskers plot. Are you mainly doing regression analyses on these? What was your sort of approach, and what were you hoping to find?
Well, when I first delved into this topic, I found an overwhelming amount of data. Like, each county had its own case and death rates, and they continuously changed week by week. And I just found it better to, I guess, put it all on a nice figure generated by R, which proved to be very helpful for me in this project. And I think I also wanted to pursue this topic mainly because it hit close to home. I mean, we all experienced the lockdowns and laws of our respective states. And I think that I really wanted to analyze how effective they proved to be in retrospect.
That's great. I was wondering, had you worked in R before? This is, this is a programming language that many people don't encounter while they're still in high school. Many people start primarily with Python and might do something like a Jupyter notebook. Were you working with R in RStudio, that sort of thing? What was that process like?
Yeah, this is my first time using R. My mentor, Surya Tripathi, who is a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley, he gave me the idea. He mentioned how it was very useful for him in his undergraduate time. And yeah, it provided me with a lot of insight. I had to take a couple little online courses and some videos on how to learn how to do R, because it felt very strange at first, but I was able to come away with some insightful figures from it.
That's amazing. I really love when there's both the sort of content learning and the wonderful sort of intellectual work that you're doing with a topic like this. When those sorts of learnings are complemented by technical skills that are developed in the course of the project, that's really like, the perfect outcome, so to speak. So I'm really glad that happened for you and that you're able to share it with us. Everyone, please, through your computer screens, give Vivek a round of applause. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'd like next to invite up Nandhika. So I will remove Vivek, and here we are.
Hi, 1 second. Hi, so I'm Nandhika, and my project is about eating disorders, and it's a comprehensive review of the psychology, neurobiology, and etiology behind the stigmatized mental illness. I worked with my mentor, Natalie, and she was such a huge help throughout this whole process, and I couldn't have done it without her. So a little bit about me. I'm a junior from Boulder, Colorado. I do karate and I play tennis, and I enjoy spending time outdoors and going to the mountains. So a little bit about my project. I'm in the process of creating a podcast that will discuss eating disorders, and today I'll be giving an introduction to the ideas that I will further explore in my podcast. So a few statistics, 47% of second graders wish that they could change how they look, which is so sad because they're only like 7 and 8. Eating disorder cases have more than doubled from 2000 to now, and 20% of untreated eating disorder cases result in death. So here are 2 charts. The chart on the right shows the distribution of eating disorders among the population, and the chart on the left shows the percentage of people in recovery for each disorder. And as you can see, there's a huge discrepancy. So binge eating disorder is almost 50% of all eating disorders, but only 10% of people with binge eating disorder are getting the treatment that they need. So why it matters. There is a ton of stigma surrounding eating disorders, and people often don't realize just how dangerous they can be. And they can occur due to things such as genetics, stress diathesis, and chemical hormonal imbalances. And the amount of eating disorder cases are rapidly increasing, and the general age group that is being affected is becoming younger than before. This is calling for action to be taken to help control the dramatic increase of people with eating disorders. So they are the deadliest mental illness, yet they're also one of the most undiagnosed / unreported. And girls aged 10 to 25 are at the highest risk of developing an eating disorder. There are three main types, and the first one is anorexia. It's an eating disorder characterized by abnormally low body weight, an intense fear of gaining weight, and a distorted perception of your body and weight. Bulimia is generally characterized by binge eating followed by purging. And binge eating disorder is a severe eating disorder characterized by recurrent episodes of eating large quantities of food and feeling a loss of control. So, binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder among all age groups and genders, but it's also the least treated and least diagnosed, and it's the most stigmatized due to a lack of understanding of where exactly it stems from and the way it affects the brain. So it's mechanistically similar to addiction, and chemicals such as dopamine and serotonin that are most active in the reward center are activated in the same ways in both binge eating disorder and addiction. And so understanding that connection can help us create a plan or strategy to better understand and help those suffering from binge eating disorder. There are several long-term effects of eating disorders, and although they're at an all-time high right now, the general public is largely misinformed. There are several long-term effects that tend to manifest for the rest of one's life, and one of these is fertility. Eating disorders cause a severe change in hormones, and for women, those include estrogen and progesterone, two of the key hormones involved in fertility. And although many people don't realize that infertility can be a direct effect of eating disorders, the fluctuation that is caused even for a treated disorder can cause infertility or problems relating to pregnancy for decades to come. And another long-term effect is a decrease in gray matter in the brain. And so as you can see in this image, gray matter is a part of the brain, and it's responsible for like decision-making skills, critical thinking, short-term and long-term memory, hand-eye coordination, motor skills, and all of that. But a study was conducted, and people with anorexia actually had a decreased percentage of gray matter compared to someone who didn't have an eating disorder. And these individuals were tracked for several years, and that percentage didn't change. So the amount of gray matter that was decreased was there for the rest of their lives. COVID changed the way that we did everything in our day-to-day lives, which consequently led to a steep increase of anxiety and depression. These, among other risk factors for eating disorders, such as prolonged use of social media and increased stress, caused the increase of eating disorders during lockdown. Current cases are estimated to be much higher than what is reported due to the lack of access to care, diagnosis, and treatment. And when lockdown restrictions were a lot tighter, many eating disorder recovery centers were closed or had to do things online, which made things incredibly difficult for people who needed help. So current and future treatments. As of right now, there are no drugs or specific pharmaceutical treatments designed solely for eating disorders, and clinical research for eating disorders is severely behind that of other mental illnesses such as anxiety, depression, and OCD. One reason for this is the stigma even within the scientific and the medical community. So for future treatments, by isolating unique receptors and chemicals targeted by eating disorders, scientists can work their way backwards to finding a potential medication. So that's my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Nandhika, thank you so much for this presentation. It is a really, it's a painful thing to think about, that so many people are suffering from this illness, and certainly the knock-on effects, the additional consequences in terms of gray matter, brain development, that sort of thing, are maybe not visible to people. So I'm so grateful to you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I know that, as you mentioned, the pandemic has really changed the way that we interact in so many ways. I don't know whether you've noticed these recent news reports about new studies coming out from internally from Facebook and Instagram about how increased exposure to social media of that kind can also lead to associated mental health effects that I think probably would closely correlate to this kind of research that you've done. Can you tell us about, how you think about this focused research fitting into sort of larger social or cultural issues, and if that, are there new areas that you want to sort of take the research in? Has it made you aware of other approaches personally, like with friends and how you interact, that sort of thing? Just would love to hear more about those thoughts.
Yeah, so social media plays like such a huge part in our lives, and I feel like it's only going to get bigger in our lives, like play a bigger part. And so, for example, Instagram, nothing we see is real, but like a lot of people don't realize that. And so, like, before I started doing my research, I didn't really know how much social media could influence someone's view of their body image and how severe it could get. And so I think that without like direct interference, this problem, like, it won't go away and it'll only get worse from here.
Well, maybe the first step in addressing these issues is just awareness of them. And so that's another reason I think we're grateful to you, and having more voices from people of your generation, of your age, be conscious of the kinds of consequences that happen here, I think will really lead to some wonderful discussions, and then hopefully also to changes in how we design technology so that it's helping us and not just hurting us, so to speak. Thanks so much for this presentation. And again, if people have questions, please add them to the chat or to the Q&A. We'd love to generate some conversations around all of these issues and how they're related. So next is Arushi. Let me invite them on stage.
Hi, George.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I will go ahead. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks great.
Awesome. So hello, everyone. My name is Arushi. Today I'm going to be presenting my Polygence project, which is going to be covering precision medicine and Parkinson's disease. I did this along my mentor, Vanita Bharat. So a little bit about me. I'm a rising junior from Calgary, Canada, and I have a strong interest in STEM, and I'm hoping to pursue neuroscience or biochemistry for the pre-med track. Some of my hobbies include debate, dance, reading, and traveling. So a little bit about my project. In my Polygence project, I explored Parkinson's disease and precision medicine. And to present my work, I created short SciComm videos as abstracts for the topics I learned, and I'm in the process of submitting a review paper currently. So let's go over what I'm going to be covering in my presentation today. Firstly, I'm going to be giving a short introduction to Parkinson's disease, as well as precision medicine. Then I'm going to be going into diagnosis of PD and then treatments. Finally, to conclude, I'll be providing summary and future directions for my presentation. Now let's start with a short introduction and a really simple question on what exactly is Parkinson's disease. Well, Parkinson's is the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the world, and it's associated with decreased dopamine production in the brain. Dopamine controls various body functions like motor control, movement, and coordination. In PD, neurons die in the parts of the brain that control movement and motor skills, as well as producing dopamine. As a result, patients with Parkinson's disease have poor balance and coordination. They have shakiness and trembling of various body parts, slower movement, and rigidity of limbs. There are also emotional changes like sleep disorders, amnesia, and difficulty in conducting autonomous body functions like controlling blood pressure. Interestingly, we don't actually know the cause for Parkinson's disease. Sometimes it's caused by familial cases, which are caused by genetics. But 90% of the time, most cases are sporadic, and we don't know the cause. I'll be going more over into the diagnosis and treatment of PD later in my presentation. But before we do that, let's discuss another important question on what exactly is precision medicine and what is its relevance in our society today. So precision medicine is a new and innovative approach for disease prevention and treatment. The concept is based around the idea of providing individualized treatments based on an individual's biological profile. Currently, medical treatments strategies are designed to suit the average patient, which makes treatments successful for some people, but highly ineffective for others. Precision medicine overcomes this limitation by providing treatments based on an individual's lifestyle, genome sequence, health history, microbiome composition, and other unique characteristics. Precision medicine is especially important for PD since the symptoms and rate of progression of PD differ from person to person. Thus, a holistic approach must be taken. On the figure below, we can see how traditional medicine differs from precision medicine, and we can see that precision medicine adds 3 additional data sets to existing traditional patient medical records, including environmental data, lifestyle data, and genomic data. Now let's look at precision medicine in more depth by analyzing the methods that show the potential of precision medicine in play, and we're going to start with diagnosis. So standard protocols for diagnosis of PD include analyzing symptoms, providing a physical and neurological examination, and looking at the medical history of the patient. However, this is not enough, and 40% of patients are undiagnosed and 25% are misdiagnosed. This is called for new methods to come up in precision medicine. And the 3 main methods I'll be discussing here are molecular imaging, biomarkers, and wearable sensors. So molecular imaging provides visual insight into what is happening in the body at the molecular and cellular level. Biomarkers are biological indicators in the body which provide information on if a certain disease is present or not. And lastly, wearable sensors, which is technology that is able to assess motor function to provide prognostic prediction and treatment evaluation. Next, I'd like to go over some treatments and analyze how these current treatments from PD can be reanalyzed and taken from the perspective of precision medicine. The 4 I'll be discussing with you today are deep brain stimulation, DBS, omics, biomarkers, and iPSCs. Starting with deep brain stimulation. It's the most commonly performed surgical treatment for Parkinson's disease. And in this procedure, electrodes are implanted in the brain, and they work to interrupt irregular electrical signaling patterns between cells. This helps to minimize the effects of Parkinson's disease, such as stiffness, slowness, and tremor. From the perspective of precision medicine, one of the key considerations in DBS is to select the most effective target location in the brain to suit the patient's anatomy, symptoms, and progression of the disease. Side effects would be another major consideration when choosing the best target. On the figure on the right, we see deep brain stimulation in action and how an electrode is implanted into the brain to interrupt those electrical signals occurring between cells and ensure smoother communication, thus minimizing the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Next, we have omics. Omics is a term that refers to various types of data and research, including genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, and microbiomics. Generally, the broad spectrum of omics encompasses fields of study that look into biological molecules and their characteristics. Integration of omics profiling in precision medicine enables clinicians to offer a tailored treatment to a particular patient. Omics has also helped us advance our understanding and learning of PD, especially in genomics. Examples include a better understanding of Lewy bodies and the LARC gene, which are both present in Parkinson's disease. On the right is an omics flowchart, which shows the various fields that omics is associated with and how all of these omics strategies can be used to provide a personalized treatment in precision medicine for all patients. Next, we have biomarkers. which is just a biological molecule that indicates if a condition or disease is present in the body. It also provides information on abnormal biological processes in your body and how your body has responded to a therapeutic intervention. Biomarkers play an important role in the treatment and prevention of PD as they assist in disease diagnosis, they monitor disease progression, and indicate treatment efficacy. Biomarkers are especially useful for identifying PD in the early stages of pathological onset, which makes it better for clinical intervention and treatment. On the bottom is a figure that shows the role of biomarker and how we take a blood or tissue specimen, analyze it molecularly, and then provide personal therapy based on biomarker identification and further analysis. Lastly, we have iPSCs, which stands for induced pluripotent stem cells. iPSCs allow us to model Parkinson's disease in labs and allow for further research and study. iPSCs are able to accurately model these cells, and thus this method is a very powerful tool in analyzing PD mutations and molecular mechanism. Through this research, we are able to build more methods for precision medicine and provide more tailored therapies when it comes in the medical field. And for a conclusion, we know through this presentation that precision medicine has a lot of potential in the medical field as becoming a revolutionary and innovative approach to providing treatment for patients. Through various methods such as omics, iPSCs, DBS, and biomarkers, precision medicine can become a professional strategy to provide benefits to PD patients. Here is the bibliography I used for my research, and I'd like to acknowledge the Polygence program and team, as well as my mentor, Vinita Bharat, for making this all possible. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arushi. We want to thank you for all of your hard work and putting together such a clear and informative presentation. I really appreciate that the precision medicine approach is one that really tries to address individuals and not this sort of one size fits all. I think that that is something we would all aspire to have our medical providers do. I know that one of the recurring news reports that I've been hearing of late is the incredible stress that COVID has put on all of our healthcare workers of late. What are some of the issues that you see sort of connecting to that broader change that we're going through? Are there kinds of policy approaches that you would say, my family is in the medical field too, and they do the sort of 4 12-hour shifts per week and then log off and reboot and then come back to the office, that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering, how does precision medicine fit with the kinds of approaches to medical scheduling that we currently follow? And, knowing that you're from Calgary, are there differences in approaches between the US and Canadian systems that you were thinking about during the project?
Yeah, for sure. So I think first, to answer your first question about precision medicine in the broader spectrum, I think precision medicine has such great potential in the medical field to become very revolutionary in providing treatments for patients. I think that while I chose to research specifically in Parkinson's disease, I think that other diseases which are unique like Parkinson's and have so much variation like Parkinson's, precision medicine is the best way to attack and approach those types of treatments and therapeutic interventions. I think that more research is definitely needed in precision medicine. It's a very new topic. And so we definitely need to look into it more, research more specifically. And I think it's going to take a lot more effort to find these specific tailored therapies. But I think in the end, we'll see a lot more benefits come out of this approach. And in terms of the differences between Calgary and Canadian healthcare system versus US, I know personally I haven't experienced the US healthcare system, but I know that here, because everything is public service, we see a little bit of a lower healthcare standard versus to other countries which have privatized healthcare. But I think here, even with a public system, we can enforce more research in this type of field and go from there in precision medicine.
Excellent, thank you. You mentioned that you are interested in STEM fields most broadly. Are you interested in pursuing medicine in particular? I know that our judge, Alex, is basically in a medical scientist program, so an MD, PhD. That's both, a practicing clinician in addition to being a researcher. What are your sort of aspirations going forward? I know, and I always ask these questions because I think Professor Gerritson's talk was a great example of, you think you're going in one direction and then you end up going in another. So I'm not asking you to make promises about where you want to go, but what are your current inspirations and ideas for where you want to go?
Yeah, well, in the future, I hope to pursue medicine and become a doctor, a practicing doctor. But as you said, you never know which path you want to take. Everything can change within such a short time.
That's great. We're all on a path of exploration together, in a sense, and that's one of the reasons I want to invite Alex. If you would like to join us on the stage, you can request to present, and I can invite you to come up so you can offer some more summary comments. And I want to also invite our other presenters to jump back on the stage if people would like to ask questions of one another, or just to engage in conversation. One of the most satisfying things for me about our program is when students are able to connect with similar-minded students. I'll be moderating a talk next, actually, with two students from very different places in the world who are both starting at Berkeley this fall. So it's really wonderful that the Polygens community can connect with one another before we all go off to college ourselves. So happy to have you all together here. I wonder, do you have any questions for one another right now based on the presentations?
Well, yeah, I mean, one question I kind of had was, I guess, for me personally, finding the topic took a pretty long amount. Like it did take a lot of time to figure out what exactly I wanted to focus on. So what made you guys want to talk about your respective topics?
Well, mine actually came up by accident, actually. This might seem kind of funny, but I was actually interested in researching something with sleep. And I'd just been doing some research on some sleep review papers. And then I eventually stumbled upon one about an antipsychotic and really found it interesting and wanted to pursue it more. And I just did that. And I really liked it.
For me, so like there's so many people I know personally with eating disorders, and I feel like there's so much like stigma and most people don't know enough about it. And before this project, I didn't know that much about it, so I kind of wanted to like raise awareness and understand how like they stem scientifically.
Yeah, and for me, I think it was just my general interest in neuroscience, as well as because Parkinson's disease is so relevant today, I wanted to explore something that had an impact and influence on our world, and also combined with my mentor's expertise, I chose my topic.
These are all great stories to show us how you arrived there. One thing I want to applaud all of you on is taking on a really, substantive project while you're still in high school. Even though it feels like this might be a continuation of things that you've been interested in previously, it's really a great accomplishment to do something of this magnitude from a high school position. In point of fact, many college students, to try to do their own long-term research project, that can still be a struggle. And one of the bits of advice, I'm glad that Alex is able to join us too. One of the bits of advice that I wanted to offer is, when you're looking for those longer term projects, really continue to do what you've done, which is to follow something that really inspires you, that you feel has enough legs, so to speak, to keep you interested and focused for a long period of time. For those of you who choose to do an advanced degree, that's really, the greatest challenge, is finding something that's meaningful to you, that you can bite into and really take apart over the course of months, perhaps even years. So I think that's really one of the muscles that you're building up in this process, is that kind of commitment to a long-term project, to be sort of tenacious about asking those questions to get towards your goal. Alex, can you offer, thanks so much again for joining us. And I was just curious, given your background too, what sort of summary insights or connections you make, questions that you wanted to ask the panel.
Yeah, I first wanted to mention that one thing that I thought was really impressive in all the talks was how you found the data that you were looking for to answer these questions, and what I thought were really interesting ways that maybe aren't always the ways that we're typically thinking to ask these questions and try and answer them. So I really applaud that in all of the speakers.
Yeah, I know this is a great point too. I know that when we do, prior to joining Polygence, I managed an undergraduate research program at Stanford. And one of the things that we really want to make clear to people is the data that sometimes you are given or that's clean for you on websites, that's sort of a best case scenario and they're good for exercises. But the real grit and grind of a lot of research is saying, this is messy, I've got to clean it, I've got to normalize it, I've got to reformat it. And a huge amount of the legwork actually happens before the analysis. So that's also something to keep in mind. And like Alex said, the creativity and the sort of the problem solving that you had to exercise in order to get to the point of analysis is already a really great accomplishment to have taken on. This has been such an enriching panel. Again, thank you for having me, the humanities kid, join you all. I've definitely learned a lot. And I want to also mention to you, I will be jumping to what should be a really interesting panel with a number of Polygence alumni who now are studying great places, UC Berkeley, MIT, UVA, and they're going to be talking about how they used their research experience and Polygence specifically on their applications to college. It should be an interesting talk and really another panel discussion like we've concluded with here. So I invite you all to join us. But for now, take a breather, get some tea, get some water, step outside. I see Arushi has a beautiful day behind her in Calgary. I'll see you maybe at my panel or in another talk later on. But thank you all so much for joining us and many congratulations on all of your hard work.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.